I would like to thank everybody for joining, the panelists and, of course, the audience. My name is Dan Tryman, and my role is the CEO of NEIBC, New England Israel Business Council. The organization is a not-for-profit volunteer organization that its mission is to strengthen the business relationship between Israel and New England, and breaking the mission into actionable steps. We can divide it into three areas. One area we involve with funding. We represent the Bird Foundation in Massachusetts, and also we help companies connect to other funding resources or sources, one-on-one with companies, all the way from ideation to market ready. And the third activity is what we call public. It's working with the delegations. It's providing presentations both to the Israeli side and to the American. Work with both governments and, of course, NGOs. And we provide conferences or mini conferences, and of course, webinars similar to that one. And with that, I would like to invite Gilad, the moderator. Gilad, the talking stick is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Let me share my screen. Okay. So thanks, Dan, for passing on the speaker. And good morning or good afternoon to all our participants. And thank you very much for joining us today. The next hour or so, we'll be talking about the human brain, more specifically about advanced technologies to enhance brain health, and thus the title of our webinar, Unlocking the Future Value and Impact of Neurotech in Healthcare. My name is Gilad Peleg, and I'm a founding partner at Neuro Capital, which is currently focusing on neurotech venture building. So going back to Professor Einstein, or Albert Einstein, his insights and his foresights, Albert Einstein was quoted as saying that if you combine the human brain with technology, the outcome is beyond imagination. And this combination of the human brain and tech is actually neurotechnology, which possesses a vast potential to disrupt healthcare practices and enhance the quality of life. For the sake of context and content, I wanted to share with you an updated NIH definition of neurotech, which basically indicates the consistency of devices, procedures used to access, monitor, investigate, assess, manipulate, and or emulate the structure and function of the neural systems of human beings. It is poised to revolutionize our understanding of the brain and to unlock innovative solutions to treat a wide range of diseases and disorders. If we look at the neural numbers, and I know you're going to see different numbers in different presentations, but the bottom line is that, devastatingly, brain disorders are responsible for a huge amount of deaths worldwide, 17 million according to one resource, which is over 30% of global annual deaths. On the other side, the neural market as an outcome, or the neural market revenue, we're talking about revenues exceeding $500 billion already back in 2022. And moving forward to 2023, what we see is that companies have managed to raise $10.4 billion across 115 deals. And this is actually a 2x increase over 2022. So that just gives you the trend. If we look at the ecosystem, neurotech ecosystem, clockwise from right to left, we're talking about cognitive assessment, of course, and cognitive enhancement, neural monitoring, neuroimaging, prosthesis, neuromodulation, neurostimulation, neurofeedback, and of course, BCI, brain-computer interface, And of course, thank you, Elon Musk, for the PR on that one. And zooming into to the Israeli neurotech ecosystem, we see more than 100. And quite frankly, we have a database which talks about 130 active neurotech startup companies. And of course, this number is increasing, covering multiple tech modalities, diseases, indications, again, all the way from imaging to stimulation, and of course to BCI. And of course, the source, or one major source of that, of course, is the academia ecosystem, where we see more than 200 labs dealing with neurology and neurotechnology. Okay, so with that introduction, I would like to move on to a clinical perspective on neurotech. And to that end, it is a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce Dr. Dawn Eliashiv, who will share with us her viewpoint on the future value and impact of neurotechnology in healthcare. Dr. Eliashiv is a professor of neurology and co-director of the UCLA Seizure Disorders Center. Dr. Eliashiv sees patients and conducts research. She was one of the few clinician scientists studying the use of MEG, a neuroimaging technique for mapping brain activity, as a non-invasive tool to localize seizures in the brain, and was one of the first to actually capture seizures with MEG. Dr. Eliashiv is an author and co-author in numerous publications and lectures, extensively, both nationally and internationally. Dr. Eliashiv, the floor and the microphone is yours. Please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's always the unmute button, but it's better to be unmuted. First of all, I really want to thank the organizers of this very important webinar and meeting of the minds. And I can't overemphasize what the importance is of collaboration and cross-fertilization between clinicians, basic scientists, and neurotech. And I think that this is something that is really becoming a lot more important now over the years, because basically, if you look at NIH dollars and money, we absolutely rely on collaboration with neurotech companies. And this is like a very exciting period of time. And even in the short sample of time that all of us have in our careers, we can't overestimate the impact of neurotechnology. So I wanted to highlight that this is something that's really becoming very evident. And if you follow national organizations and global organizations like the World Health Organization, and more specifically in my subspecialty, the International League Against Epilepsy and American Epilepsy Society, you can see that the whole concept, there's a lot more public interest in addressing needs of patients with neurological disorders. You can see that the Brain Health Initiative and Call for Action, and one of the keynote speakers this last American Academy of Neurology was actually Sanjay Gupta, and we were all advocating together that brain health is something very important. And this is especially important with the aging population. I don't know if you realize there is, even in the United States and globally, there's a shortage of neurology, and that makes more important also for us to address neurotechnology, to have tools that can address the growing problems of our population. And we really stress that. Now, I know the numbers can be different. It really depends on what sources all of us use, but there is a growing burden of neurological care. However you look, the T is trillions. So basically there's a lot of impact. And one of the things that we're talking about is the importance of neurotech in addressing this economic burden, because the investment in neurotechnology, and there is a big translational gap of taking things from the bench towards clinical care, and that's extremely important. So fast tracking technologies and utilizing all the neurotechnological tools is something that has the potential also not only to relieve the global burden of health and of neurological disorders, but also to curb these costs. And I think there's a lot of attention from lawmakers. I every year go to Neurology on the Hill and address these concerns and try to get more funding. But I think the partnership with neurotech companies and the companies you're going to hear today, with the collaboration with Israeli companies that have immense R&D and collaboration, I think that that's something that is very important. You can see the numbers here. Everybody has slightly different numbers, but whatever you can see, there's a growth, there's an interest. And I can tell you, as somebody who collaborates with different institutions, some of my colleagues in Stanford say it's almost crucial as part of the medical. I teach residents and fellows and the young generation, and they're extremely interested in the impact of neurotech. Specifically, I want to just give you an example of how things are evolving, especially in my subspecialty, which is drug-resistant epilepsy. We have 65 million people with epilepsy. Some sources may say 50 million. In the United States alone, there are like over 3 million patients with epilepsy. The thing is, like 40% of those patients have drug-resistant epilepsy, which means that if you look at the medications, they really don't work for a large number of these patients. And that's where all the new technologies, one aspect of the new technologies that we've seen, there are new modalities of neuromodulation, putting implanted electrodes in the brain, either in the thalamus or in the cortex, with seizure detections. Those things were unthinkable even 20 years ago. And what I want to talk also is to give you the impact. Yes, I am focused on epilepsy, but think about all the studies that we have seen. We have published some manuscripts in Nature and other journals, looking also into the effect of neurostimulation for epilepsy on memory, and looking into utilizing those things in psychiatric comorbidity. And the neurotechnological innovations play a crucial role in developing these conditions. Think about seizure detection and prediction. Think about the long term. If possibly you can use like either wearable devices or other devices on the scalp where you can monitor longitudinally patients and tell them which periods in their lives have more seizure burden and which ones they're more prone to seizures and which they're less prone. And that brings us to the exciting utility of big data, seizure detection, predictions. We all know that the brain is quite complex, and now we're doing a lot of work on mapping networks and doing multimodality imaging. And there is a revolution in imaging. And first and foremost, the aim is to use and leverage all the neurotechnology in order to shorten the translational gap, because a lot of those patients suffer constant morbidity and mortality. And so I think these are very exciting times. You're going to hear some wonderful presentations about some of this evolving technology. And I want to thank you all again for inviting me to this very important forum.
Thanks very much, Dr. Yashiv, for the insightful presentation and comments. I would like to invite our first speaker and first company, Ms. Gilit Segel from Elda BrainTech.
Thanks, Gilad, and hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today and participate in this webinar. I really believe it brings together innovative neurotech solutions that are set to become game changers in the near future. So I'm Gilit Sigal, the CEO of Elda BrainTech. I'm bringing over 35 years of leadership experience in high-tech companies, spanning startups to multinational corporations. I've specialized in the technology side of the house, so information technology and enterprise software development, all in a large scale and global settings. Today, I'll be presenting our groundbreaking technology designed to transform the way neurologists make informed decisions. Allow me to introduce a wow solution that combines our patented technology with AI-based processing to provide a comprehensive view of the brain activity. This advanced visual tool is invaluable for both research and clinical applications. The unique data that we gather, analyze, and share with the healthcare community is crucial for advancing the understanding and treatment of a wide range of neurological conditions. So our first proven application within the broader scope of neurology disorder is focused on the world of epilepsy. So let's talk about epilepsy a little bit. According to WHO, over 1% of the world population is diagnosed with epilepsy. Dr. Eliashiv mentioned 65 million. No matter what number you were looking at, we were looking at 50 million, but it's there. It's over 1% of the world population. Now, 30% or even maybe 40% of them do not respond to medications and are categorized as suffering from drug-resistant epilepsy. We're talking about over 15 to 20 million individuals, yet only 3% of them receive treatment. Just imagine waking up every morning, not knowing if a seizure will strike, fear to do what most people do, no matter what age you are. This is a global challenge. Some even will say a global crisis, affecting many lives, and also the healthcare community who is unable to provide help or hope to these people. By the way, the gorgeous boy in the picture is my grandson, who was diagnosed 2 years ago with epilepsy. So on a personal front, I'm very familiar with the challenge. The take-home message here is that we have the technology to offer hope to millions suffering from drug-resistant epilepsy. Let's take a look at the patient journey for a second to understand the missing link. So I'll start from the left side of the slide. The neurologist diagnosed epilepsy and begins adjusting medications. Each medication takes months to assess, often leading to a long trial and error process. Sometimes it takes years. After 2 medications that are ineffective, the patient is diagnosed with drug-resistant epilepsy. By this point, the patient has undergone multiple diagnostic tests, EEG, MRI, PET scans, frequent hospitalizations due to uncontrolled seizures, emergency room visits, numerous medications with or without side effects, and significant loss of productivity for both the patient himself and those supporting him, all resulting in a poor quality of life for everyone. It is important to note, though, that there are currently advanced treatments that can help drug-resistant epilepsy. You can see them. You can see the list on the right side of the screen of the slide, from surgery to remove the epileptogenic focus, that is more traditional, to advanced solution, different neural stimulators like VNS, RNS, DBS, and even laser treatment. But the key for any successful implementation of those options is accurately localizing the epileptogenic zone, the seizure-causing area of the abnormal brain. Current clinical options for localizations are limited. They are either invasive and or very expensive and or radioactives and or have low availabilities in some countries and or require hospitalizations. Our technology is aiming to be the first clinical approved EEG fMRI solution in the market, and the only one that is non-invasive, non-radioactive, requires no hospitalization, and can be implemented anywhere with a standard MRI machine. Now I choose to present our working prototype in a clear visual way. So let's see how it looks. What you see here is our prototype as it operates in the Tel Aviv Medical Center. It all starts with our MR-compatible EEG cup with 64 electrodes that are wired in a unique way called dual array, which is the patent behind our technology. This is an opportunity for me to introduce my team. You can see Ido Shaham, our COO, simulates the patient, Guy Gurevich, our medical expert, and the video itself created by our CTO, Eyal Saban. Preparing the patient to go into the MRI with our MR-compatible EEG cup. The MRI scan starts, and at the same time, the EEG data collection and recording software is activated. What we see here, the raw data coming out of the EEG, is very noisy with tons of artifacts in a way that the screen looks black. At the end of the scan, the information is processed by our sophisticated software, and the noise is filtered in a way that the EEG looks like any other regular EEG, so neurologists can read it. Pause here for a second. Later on, we correlate between the abnormal events detected in the EEG with the MRI images at the time of the detected events. So if you think about that, we combine data from two modalities. The when brain activity occurred, the temporal resolution provided by the EEG with an accuracy of milliseconds, and the where the brain activity occurred, the spatial resolution provided by the fMRI with an accuracy of millimeters. The combined outcome is the key to the accurate localization of the focus of the problem. Finally, a report is generated presenting the EEG data, the fMRI data, and the suspected area to the neurologist for further informed decisions. Few words about our roadmap. So we already make a clinical impact. Our prototype was invented and operates at the Tel Aviv Medical Center. Candidates for surgery or any advanced treatment from all over the country are already sent to perform our unique test. Over 300 patients were already scanned, and these days we hold a 3 months, I think, waiting list. We've seen remarkable results with our technology, but our goal is to commercialize it so millions of patients around the world can benefit from it. Our first step will be to launch a beta program to be installed within a year at 5 to 10 epilepsy centers to build a data set, clinical evidence, and KOL advocacy needed to drive adoption. LOIs are already signed with some centers in Israel, United States, and Europe, and we're working on some more. From there, we're going to launch a cloud-based SaaS model, which will drive scalability and recurring revenue. We then plan to expand our platform by integrating additional data sources such as blood tests, genetic tests, and beyond that, we plan to extend our neurological indications to such as, stroke, traumatic brain injury, sleep disorders, Parkinson, and potentially more, all based on research that will be conducted in the coming years. If you just think about that, our technology is EEG-informed fMRI. So we use the electrical signals to identify functional issues and look for their expressions in the fMRI. This unique data is invaluable for research and biomarkers creation for many disorders. These days, we're actively raising funds for our next round so we can execute on our roadmap. Few words about our business model concept. So first, any medical center with MRI system can use our technology. All they need to do is purchase our MR-compatible EEG cup and acquisition software, along with a one-time setup fee. Later on, they can buy bundles of processing transactions, so pay by click, if you will. They simply submit the raw data of the EEG and fMRI to our cloud system, where our advanced AI software filters artifacts and compute the localization of the epileptogenic zone. Then we send back the comprehensive report to the neurologist for further decisions. Our reimbursement strategies we're going to use to begin with, we're going to use existing EEG and fMRI codes. To do that, in order to do that, we need to obtain 510(k) approval from the FDA for EEG under MRI. By the way, this strategy already confirmed and approved by the FDA. Later on, we'll create our own dedicated code for FDA approval. So, as you can see, we have a proven technology with clear vision and roadmap, and an established and experienced leadership team and advisory board. In summary, ELDA has a breakthrough design to scale platform technology, clinically validated solution that will set a new standard in precision neurology. In the last few minutes, you've seen this wow solution that combines our patented technology and AI-based processing in order to provide a comprehensive view of a brain activity. I hope you could realize that this advanced visual tool is invaluable for both research and clinical applications, and that the unique data we gather is crucial for advancing our understanding and treatment of a wide range of neurological decisions. I encourage you to stay and learn more about these exciting neurotech advancements that we present here today. I want to thank you for your attention, and we'll take questions in the chat or offline as needed. Feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Gilit, for the exciting presentation. And again, as mentioned earlier, really, I welcome our participants. If there are any questions specifically to one of the companies or with regards to neurotech in large, please feel free to share it in the chat, and we'll try to address either online during the panel discussion or later on offline. And now I'd like to introduce our second company, NeuroHelp. Once again, in this case, it is a pleasure and honor for me to introduce Professor Owen Shriki from NeuroHelp. Professor Shriki is an expert in EEG signal analysis, computational neuroscience, and machine learning. Professor Shriki is the head of the Computational Psychiatry and Neurotechnology Lab at the Department of Cognitive and Brain Sciences, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Professor Shriki, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gilad, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce to you NeuroHelp. We are now finalizing what we call Epines. It's a seizure detection and prediction device designed to enhance patient outcomes and quality of life. As Gilad said, I'm Professor Owen Shriki, and I'm the co-founder and the CTO of this company. So you've already heard the numbers about the prevalence of epilepsy in the world, drug-resistant, 20 million people across the world. There are 5 million new diagnoses every year. And people with epilepsy, especially those who are drug-resistant, suffer from stress, poor quality of life. There's a certain phenomenon called SUDEP, sudden unexpected death due to epilepsy, which occurs mainly in children, mainly during nighttime. There's a financial burden on families and on the healthcare system. In the US, it's more than $20,000 for adults, more than $30,000 for children. The process of medication customization typically extends beyond a year due to inefficient assessment of treatment efficacy. And existing solutions are relatively limited to certain seizure types, and they do not predict seizures. So this gap underscores the critical need for a solution that both detects and predicts seizures across all types. This is what we're trying to develop. So our solution is a combination of hardware and software. It features a compact and comfortable EEG headband equipped with 8 electrodes and additional sensors. And at the core, we have algorithms. which integrate our extensive knowledge and intellectual property in analyzing neural dynamics and in advanced machine and deep learning. So we process the data, we extract those features, measures of the underlying brain dynamics, and then use machine and deep learning to classify the data and generate alerts. So we have two types of alerts: a detection alert, namely that there is a seizure going on now, and a prediction alert, which predicts an upcoming seizure on timescales of hours in advance. And we can also generate a seizure log for the clinicians to make informed decisions, something which does not currently exist in a reliable manner. Seizure diaries of families are not reliable. So this is how our solution looks like. This is Happiness. We've been working on that for the past 2 years with third-party companies in terms of the mechanical design and the electronics. The mechanical design is finalized. The electronics too. We're just finalizing a few things about the electronics and hopefully start clinical experiments in a few months' time from now. We have a functional model that works. But this would be like the final system with for nighttime use. So this is a system that is designed especially for nighttime use. It's all fabrics. It has these sensors, which are dry sensors that penetrate the hair, and additional sensors, for example, for heart activity. And we've worked a lot on optimizing. There's a major challenge when you go to wearable technologies, which I want to discuss in a moment, which is how to balance two competing factors or priorities. One is that you want to have high quality signals, and you want the system to be highly accurate, in our case, in detecting and predicting seizures. But on the other hand, it's a wearable device. So people must be able to, easily set it up and use it for a prolonged period. How do you balance these two competing challenges? I mean, like, these are on the right side, we see the systems that we use in the lab, which are very cumbersome. On the other side, you see a system that looks like earbuds, but it really measures EEG, but would it generate too many false alarms? So we have done a very systematic study on that. It's even published. What you see here, just to give you the gist of it, is the number of electrodes on the x-axis and a measure of performance of the machine learning on the y-axis. Each point here, each dot is a configuration of the EEG sensors, and there are, in our database, there are systems with 19 electrodes. So we choose one of them as a reference. So the dashed line is what happens if we take all 18 electrodes. But then as we go down with the number of electrodes, performance goes down. So we've done this very detailed analysis, and we decided, in our case, to strike the ballpark here, or to strike the balance between, the ergonomics and precision using 8 sensors. And now we have a system that gives very high performance in terms of detecting the seizures, even with eight sensors. So I won't get more into that, but here are some numbers. What you see here on the right side, these are two softwares that use all 19 electrons, and they are used by neurologists in hospitals to detect seizures, typically in a retrospective manner, going over data. For each seizure that they detect, typically a seizure a day, in this data, they generate 7 to 10 false alarms. Our algorithm produces 0.2 false alarms per 24 hours. So it's like 1 per week, and it can be even further reduced using personalization. We also have a seizure prediction algorithm, which generates alert around 4 hours in advance. I will skip this slide, but I mean, just in the interest of time, but the idea is that we have like a seizure risk signal that goes up prior to seizures, a few hours before seizure. Those vertical black lines they mark seizures in the data, and when we cross a threshold, we generate an alert. So of course, 4 hours may be even too much for the people, so we can of course shorten the alert time depending on the need. But people will be able to organize their life, to decide, make decisions. I think I'll skip the team, but just maybe mention the R&D team. We are working with Dr. Felix Benninger, the head of epilepsy at Bellinson Hospital. We are working with another child epileptologist from Schneider. And we have a team of experts who combine knowledge in brain sciences with knowledge in machine deep learning and all that. So it's a very unique team, and we also have a hardware person. That's the secret formula. Motivation times talent divided by ego for getting the best people. A bit about the landscape briefly. Existing solutions typically fall to either invasive, limited to very severe cases, or non-invasive, which are typically non-EEG. And they can do mainly seizure detection. So they do not predict seizures, and they're also not FDA cleared, most of them, except for Empatica. But what we try to offer is a unique non-invasive technology that provides both seizure detection and prediction across a broad spectrum of seizure types. Our go-to-market strategy is essentially based on establishing the clinical evidence, being in touch with KOLs, clinical centers, leveraging relationships also with epilepsy societies. And the model is essentially a consumer-driven approach, mainly B2C and B2B2C. The business model would be device sales and monthly subscription. These are, of course, just estimates. And of course, reimbursement is critical. From January 2024, there is reimbursement on seizure detection devices in the state of Minnesota. The hope is that this would go to other states as well. But FDA cleared seizure detection devices are already reimbursed in Minnesota. Good news. So finally, I'll mention our roadmap. We were established a bit more than 3 years ago. We mainly raised funding from private investors from the Israel Innovation Authority. We participated in a few programs of UCB. It's a big pharma company in the epilepsy domain. We just recently finished the Mass Challenge accelerator, the Israeli version of Mass Challenge. Probably many of you know that. Another accelerator of the US Epilepsy Foundation. The goal is in the upcoming months to finalize a prototype of happiness, perform clinical studies, and obtain in the second half of 2025, hopefully FDA clearance, and then in early 2026, go to market. Later on, we will add the seizure prediction, the first device for regulatory consideration. We focus on detection, but we already have the seizure prediction. And later on, even closing the loop, namely that even if we predict seizures, there are ways that can prevent seizures. And then going beyond epilepsy, there's a vision beyond that, which is related to remote neurology. But I think in the interest of time, I'll skip the details, and thank you for listening. These are the major unique aspects of what we're developing.
Thank you very much, Professor Shiki, for that one. Last but not least, we have Neurofind, and for Neurofind, we have a special treat. Both Mr. Avi Aron and Dr. Noam Peled will present. So passing it over to you guys.
Thanks again, Gilad and Dan, for inviting us. I'm Noam Peled, the CEO of Find Neuro, where we develop decision support platform for epilepsy. I did my PhD in neuroscience and machine learning in Israel and moved around 10 years ago to Boston to do my postdoc here at Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. In the recent 3 years, I transitioned to the company. Around 2.5 years ago, I met Avi. And Avi, please say something about yourself, introduce yourself before I continue.
Thanks for the invite. About myself, serial entrepreneur, especially in the field of neurotech, especially after being diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor and taking it all the way to inventing the solution, etc. Vision Sense that was acquired by Medtronic, was a partner with Opening and the strategy of Joy Ventures, later had another VC, Healthia Ventures, and now another one, Serendipity Ventures, just starting for the field of neurotech and mental health. I co-founded, invented, etc. Many companies. I've been basically focusing on this field for the last 25 years, since I was a patient. That's it, and I would love to see people healthier and the Israeli economy flourishing, because we will have many neurotech companies.
Thanks, Avi. Before diving into epilepsy, just want to give a global scope about neuromodulation. And in the recent years, as you can see from the figures, there are breakthrough of using neuromodulation for neurological disorders like OCD or drug-resistant epilepsy, depression, using invasive electrodes that can record and also stimulate. And even there is one study here just for enhancement of healthy patients. In the last 10 years, there are also use of more than 10 years, use of neuromodulation also in epilepsy, in deep brain stimulation, or RNS, which is a responsive neurostimulation, which, as Oren said, it's also closed loop, means this is called closed loop neuromodulation. It's a device that sense and stimulates when it senses a seizure. So let's talk a bit about epilepsy and then we connect all the dots. We already talked about the market and how many patients there are, and I just want to emphasize the outcome of the surgery. As it's been said that less than 3% refer to a surgery, but even the lucky ones that refer to a surgery, the outcomes are inconsistent. They vary from 30% to 80%, depends on the epilepsy. And let's say even if we're talking about the successful cases, the 70–80%, those patients, think about the second half. Let's say that one of the more common surgery is temporal resection, where they resect the temporal lobe. And this claimed to be a simple procedure, but between 20 to 30% of the patients keep seizing after the surgery, and now they lack a lobe. A whole lobe was resected. So this is devastating. And in this talk, I want to focus on research in the last couple of years that show that as much as it's important to localize the seizure onset zone, it's also important to analyze the dynamics, the neurodynamics of the epilepsy. Epilepsy is a network phenomena. It's propagate over the brain. It creates networks. And in these networks, there are nodes, some of them more important than others. And in fine neuro, we are using this technique to identify these nodes that seems to drive the seizure. So it's not only the seizure onset zone, it's other nodes that we call critical nodes. And those nodes need to be targeted in a surgery to achieve better outcomes or better chances for seizure freedom. So while we are doing that, we also, except of trying to improve surgical outcomes, we want to enable a shift that's in the last 5 years, you can see it in the United States at least, a shift for a less invasive and more precise treatment. Instead of resection complete lobes, maybe ablate or neuromodulate precise targets in the brain, and it will be also more reversible and less harm. So let's talk about our first success story. So as I said, I was doing my postdoc at Mass General Hospital, where we see patients from all New England. And we're using a special device called MEG. It's like EEG, but for magnetic fields. The source localization is much better. And in this case, a small girl was referred to us, 6 years old, with around 50 seizures a day, coming from different brain regions. And those cases are very hard to diagnose. Usually they don't treat or resect all the brain regions, of course. And there was no real hope for this girl. And this is where the first time that we decided that we want to use the heavily underutilized device, the MEG, also to look at the neurodynamics and to try to reconstruct her network. So we did find 4 hubs or 4 points in her network, showing that it looked like they drive all of her seizures. I luckily had enough Israeli chutzpah to go to the neurosurgeon and try to convince him to shift the treatment towards an RNS device, the closed-loop neuromodulation. and eventually was able to stop all of her seizures from 50 to 0. I took this case very personally, and I decided that I want to bring this technology to as many patients as possible. And this is when we also decided that we need to found a company around it, because we need to raise money, and we need FDA, and so on. And after that, we continued to do a proof of concept, because as much as this case was remarkable, we need to show proof. So we ran a study on 26 patients, and we tried to do something, well, it's not easy, but we tried to do the following. We used the raw MEG signals, as you can see here, and we tried to use our algorithms to find the most critical nodes in the network, so where the resection should have been if they use our technology, and eventually also predict the outcome. And we saw that we were able to outperform the existing clinical approach by 150%. Our solution is also, it's a SaaS, it's a cloud-based SaaS. First of all, this is based on what we did. My postdoc, we have a platform first to visualize and integrate the data. And this is important because clinicians, when they record data for epileptic patients, they record it from different devices. If it's MRI, fMRI, scalp EEG, MEG, and after that also invasive electrodes. And back then there was no tool that can integrate and visualize all of this rich information. Next, this is the critical algorithm, the critical nodes algorithm that we developed. That here's an example of a network. So we help the clinicians to reconstruct the network, find later on if they wish to implant invasive electrodes, so where to implant those electrodes to cover the network. We analyze again the data now from the invasive electrodes, and in the unifying model, we help the neurosurgeon to achieve and to do a more precise surgery. We are continuing to do clinical validation. We have 4 to 5 hospitals, university hospitals in the US, and as a beta sites. So we run now hundreds of patients as a much bigger proof of concept. These are nice results that we publish on covers of journals. And Howard Weiner, he's a chief neurosurgeon in Texas Children's, one of our collaborators, where he talked about how he thinks that he can improve his surgical outcomes by using our platform. And maybe Avi, I let you continue from here.
Thanks, Noam. The company is based off Noam's research, 2 patents that were exclusively licensed from Harvard MGB. I'm running in parallel to performing the clinical work. We signed a strategic partnership with a leader in the field that understood that utilizing our solution can open additional markets for them. And in addition to working in the drug-resistant epilepsy field, we have initiated in some of them, in some other areas, research like major depressive disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, etc., etc. And we believe that in the future, we will license these verticals as well. Obviously, like any other company ever found, we will reach $100 million in year 5, and it's a cloud base, so obviously high margins and relatively net burn, but the proof is in the pudding, not in the Excel. The company started with DARPA grant. We closed $750,000 as a safe, and now we are seeking $8 million as a seed round that will allow us to finalize the development of the product, including FDA clearance, and start initial revenues. You've already met 2/3 of the executive team, and I will run because we're short on time. And again, top-notch advisory board. And to summarize, again, a disruptive decision support platform that allows physicians to better understand the critical zone and operate in a least invasive manner on drug-resistant epilepsy patients as the first vertical. All the rest I think we have already discussed, so I will run and thank you all and good luck to everyone.
Thank you very much, Avi and Noam. And thank you for all our speakers for 3 super exciting companies. I would like to now move on to our panel discussion. And obviously, we all understand that neurotech is broader and deeper than epilepsy, and perhaps we'll talk about that a bit in the panel. But going straight to the panel, so perhaps we'll start with the first question, which is a bit broad, but I'd like to present that to our panel members. There we go. So we talked about epilepsy, we talked about neurotech, we talked about different procedures. And again, neurotech, as you may recall from the ecosystem that we discussed, starts from cognitive enhancement, goes on to imaging and prosthesis, and of course, stimulation modulation, and obviously BCI, the brain-computer interface. So given that ecosystem, I'd like to pose the question, how do you guys see neurotech as transforming healthcare in the next decade? What do you guys see as the most promising technologies currently in development? And how might they impact patient care? And of course, moving on to the more public and well-known diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson, etc. Perhaps, Professor Elyashiv, you could start and lead the way to addressing this broad question.
Certainly, it's a very broad question, but I think there are a lot of things that have immediate impact. I think that now with computing power, we do know that the localization techniques in epilepsy have undergone transformative changes. And I think the talks that we saw here can be implemented immediately. So what we saw here is not just the vision of how I see things in the decade. I think that there are solutions now that are available to really expand the use of neurotechnology. We're talking about neurostimulation. Neurostimulation is now. We're talking about the functional MRI and EEG and multimodality. So I think that's an excellent modality that can be, it's really underutilized, and we can see transformative. What I think is important is increasing access, and increasing access is something that is important. So, and biomarkers. There's a lot of talk now about biomarkers in disease, and I'm purposely like expanding. You know, one question is like, patients with traumatic brain injury and concussions, which ones will develop epilepsy? Which ones will not develop epilepsy? And that impacts. And I know that we're concentrated on epilepsy, which is my subspecialty as an epileptologist, but we all know that patients with epilepsy have about 40% of them have psychiatric and psychological comorbidities. I'm involved in the trial, advising in the trial that looking at PTSD and using neurostimulation and responsive neuroRNS in patients with PTSD. And we all know now that you can use biomarkers using advanced imaging techniques, not just in epilepsy, but looking into movement disorders and looking into Alzheimer's. There's a tremendous explosion in mapping of networks. In fact, even the American Epilepsy Society have changed its logo to include networks and nodes. So I think that it really is expanding, and a lot of times, and I know that also as a clinician, a lot of even medications that have been initially used for epilepsy are now used for other things like anxiety or psychiatric comorbidities. So I think that there's a tremendous revolution. And one thing that we didn't mention here is the importance of preventative care, because when you're looking into disease states like Alzheimer's, if we can identify networks in the future that can predict which patients and over time and easily access brain networks and look for aberrations or alterations in brain networks, we can identify patients at risk for neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Thank you. Thank you, Adon. Professor Shiki, would you like to add your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I totally agree with everything Don just said. I think we will see breakthroughs in both invasive and non-invasive technologies. I'll focus on the non-invasive. So I think we'll see more and more wearable devices, not just EEG, but hybrid systems, EEG, other sensors like optical sensors and watches, additional sensors, and there will be also a holistic perspective on the brain. So it's the brain and body, it's not just the brain. So neurotechnology will not be just neuro, but other sensors for heart activity, immune system, metabolic system, integrating different modalities. So we'll start seeing those kind of hybrid systems, and they will be affordable. So Don mentioned accessibility. We have in the US what's called neurological deserts, where there are no neurologists nearby. So I think once we'll have those wearable devices deployed, we will see more and more remote neurology, and we will see longitudinal monitoring of patients, which will indeed allow early identification and prediction of different disorders, or even identifying and predicting, changes in states across the disorders, like transitions in bipolar disorder between the depression and mania, or episodes in schizophrenia. So we'll start seeing all these technologies. And of course, there will be also the invasive sides like Elon Musk and Synchron and other companies who are developing very interesting invasive solutions to monitor brain activity. Yeah, I'll stop here. I mean, there are so many things to say more. I'll wait for the next question, maybe add a bit more.
Yeah, no, thank you, Owen. That's super critical. And I actually want to jump to one of the questions which was posted in the chat, because I mean, it's first of all, we promised to address it, but I really think it's spot on. Daniela Rabinovich is asking, when you say network, what exactly do you mean, i.e. neural networks? What's an example from your research? So anyone, Dawn or Owen, if you'd like to explain what neural networks are all about.
Networks exist at different scale, but the brain itself is a network. We have around 90 billion neurons in the brain. They're all interconnected. Each neuron sends connections to about 1,000 to 10,000 other neurons and receives connections from approximately the same number. We can talk about networks of brain regions. And so networks exist at all scales. And that's why we also need temporal resolution and spatial resolution to probe these networks, different scales, both spatial and temporal. But this is what we refer to. So I mean, the brain is not a set of isolated systems. And that's why when you have, for example, a seizure starting in a certain focus, it can spread to the whole brain or to a certain limited network of brain areas. And then there are manifestations. If these are motor-related networks, it will have motor effects. If these are sensory areas or sensory networks. And for example, often Don can say more about that, but for example, in epilepsy, often you have cases where there's a child and there's an epileptic focus on the motor network, on a network of motor areas. So if you remove this area, there will be motor impairments. If you do not remove, they may suffer from seizures for the rest of their life. So you have to have some network understanding. How would you modulate the network or treat it in order to find a solution to this? Don, maybe you want to add more.
Please, Don.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just add two sentences. Everything is interconnected, especially in epilepsy. You're talking about areas of synchronization. So sometimes if you stimulate one area, you may actually stimulate an area that inhibits other regions. So I think it's important to map when you make decisions to predict in advance using advanced connectivity measures. And the imaging is really getting superb. What is going to be the effect of stimulating in a particular place in the thalamus or in some other structure of the brain? What will be the influence on other regions? And also there's another concept which is, I don't want to get too technical, but the default mode network. There are certain areas of the brain that are always active and always interact. So the what I see neurotechnology in the future is able to monitor things long term and to give these tools and analyze them much quickly than humans are able to do.
Great, thank you. So again, I want to take it to a bit of a broader level, and of course, Avi, Gilit, and Dom, please feel free. One of the questions that we had is, how might advancements in neurotech intersect with other emerging technologies such as gene therapy or other personalized medicine? If any of our speakers would like to address that one.
Maybe a couple of thoughts about that. Personal treatments or personal as also we are doing that, and many companies, different companies are doing that. That while we collect these vast databases, in the long run, what I believe is the future. That's when a new patient will arrive, we will personalize the treatment not only based on the statistic that we have on the population, but on similar patient to this patient based on our databases. And we can also know what was effective and what wasn't. So based of this knowledge, I believe that in the future, this treatment will be much more personalized specifically for a patient, also based off the neurodynamics.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just add my 2 cents on that. I mean, today we're talking mostly about med tech. I mean, it's not med care, it's med tech, and which means that we're talking about a huge amount of tech players from Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple, Google, etc., who are highly impacting healthcare, which means that we're creating a huge, exponentially growing amount of data in health. And of course, the more data you have, you can both predict and prevent. And that's the essence of personalization. And all of healthcare, and obviously neurotech, is shifting and aiming at preventive medicine, which is much better than treating people post factum. Any additional points on that, or should I?
No, what I wanted, I'm going more in the future. I think that there is going to be an intersection between gene therapy and neurotechnology because there are certain areas that express genes differently. And so what I see in the future is that certain regions of the brain that can express certain genes can be turned maybe on and off using neurotechnology and stimulation and inhibition. This is not available right now, commercially at least, but I think there are a lot of horizons. And then also like choosing, seconding the personalized medicine, which technology, which patients would benefit from gene therapy, which patients would benefit from neurotechnology, where can we combine it? So I think there is no ceiling. There are a lot of exciting things that are going to be revolutionize care during the coming few decades.
Thank you for that, Don. I see our audience is very quiet today. Not too many questions, that's fine. So maybe here's one somewhat of a different angle, but something that I think we hear a lot about and read a lot about is the issue or the notion of neuroethics and how we deal with these future technologies, maybe more specific, the BCIs, etc. Again, if any of our panelists would like to take a first shot at that, that would be great.
I'll take a small shot because I actually I was involved, didn't get funded, we're trying to fund it again. We were looking into what is the effect on decision making and the concept of people that have either interfaces or even have devices for epilepsy. So I think that there are some ethical considerations, but I can tell you as a clinician, this is not double blind, and this is obviously, on my own experience is that patients actually look at seizure prediction in a positive way. I mean, I use that with the RNS device, and there are other people here who are looking at other devices and at long term. One of the things that is emotionally most troubling to patients is the uncertainty. They don't know when a seizure is going to happen. They don't know which, is today a good day or a bad day to do a certain activity. So I think that as long as, when we look at the ethical boundaries of giving control. So I think that the way to address the ethical boundaries is actually empowering patients, giving them more control over their life, giving them more power about decision making that they have in their things. So I think that enhances their autonomy. And that's the direction I think that we should market, or us physicians and the neurotech companies, as we're enhancing their lives, we're enhancing their autonomy.
Well,
Thank
what I would
Please.
see as a major challenge in terms of neuroethics is invasion to privacy. So we are developing those brain-computer interfaces. Currently, most of these technologies, they need the cooperation of the subject, whether it's a patient or just a healthy subject who would like to use a brain-computer interface to control a video game. But the thing is that you can do what cybersecurity people call a side channel attack. You can try to steal some information, to extract some information without the subject being aware of that. It's challenging these days, but it can be done to some extent, and it has been shown that to some extent you can read the minds of people if you have using EEG, using invasive technologies, using fMRI, which is not portable, but still you can extract some information about the thoughts of people, and that would be a consideration that we will need to take into account in the upcoming future.
Yeah. Thank you,
I mean,
Owen.
there's more to add. I mean, for example, neurotechnologies can enhance. You can get cognitive enhancement. So rich people will be able to, enhance the cognitive abilities of their children. But in a sense, this happens today. If you can pay for a better school or university. So, but the privacy I think, is a very interesting issue.
Got it. Thank you very much. Long question over here from Lee, saying that she's coming from a background in Intel. I wonder if you would like to explain that question so we could try and address it.
I'm a mathematician by training, and I'm always looking for symmetries across the apparently unrelated. And I'm always intrigued in terms of memory processes, at least from my experiences, as often being a process of spontaneous activation, particularly when you are recalling a memory that you could not individually retrieve. And if there's any countersymmetry between those spontaneous neurological activation of memory and the unfortunate spontaneous activation of epileptic processes in terms of future research. Does the question make sense?
I think it does, but I'm the layman on the group, so I'll allow one of the doctors to have to apply, and I can add my perspective.
There is a certain popular science book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks, a famous neurologist. It tells a story about an old lady who suddenly heard songs from her childhood, from the time when she was at kindergarten. She was looking for the radio, but there was no radio. She was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. So it was her auditory system generating these songs. So she was essentially recalling those songs as a consequence of an epileptic seizure. So if it relates to this question, so yes, it's kind of happened. And in a sense, I believe, and I have some research on that, that the brain, in a sense, when it tries to recall memories, it pushes itself closer to these critical transition points. So brain networks that are now trying to recall memories, they're getting closer to a point, to a certain transition point, where they can generate those memories, and that can also manifest in some extreme cases as seizures. I don't know if it helps, but there is a relationship. I don't know, maybe Don want to.
Yeah, let me
Please.
interject. First of all, Oliver Sacks, he was a UCLA resident, so just he was a UCLA trained neurologist, and I actually knew him, when he was alive. He was like coming to UCLA and signing the books. Um, I think what you're saying is intriguing, but as somebody that does a lot of work on patients that have implanted electrodes, aka stereo EEG, and doing memory testing on those patients, I'm always intrigued when you see the signals of the brain like firing when patients don't even recall, but the brain itself recalls that it's something that it remembered, was familiar. It is something that is not strange for them. So even if they didn't remember that particular incident, there was like sudden increase in the brain firing and all that. But we are doing a lot of experimentation and looking into stimulation during memory, and looking what is the effects of doing stimulation and how it affects memory. Does it enhance memory? Does it inhibit memory? So I think there's a lot of interaction. What is translational and what the future holds? We'll see what the future holds, but there's a lot of work being done now on the relationship between cognition, memory, epilepsy, networks, and the future of manipulating these networks in order to enhance memory.
There was actually one final question over here, which maybe you somewhat addressed, but let me just read it out. Are there any studies on the increased use of digital technologies versus cognitive development? Now, there's a participant titled WC. Perhaps if he or she would like to explain that question, we could try and address that as well.
Yeah, this is Windsor. I'm doing a lot of computer work now versus like my whole career has been in the industry, actually going through roles, but having been on the computer a lot now, I know that the learning patterns are just very different. And then when I have to switch back and I'm sorry. And then when I have to switch back and forth to the digital world versus the real world, um, I have to reconnect or disconnect because the associations are just very different. And so that's where the question is. And with the kids using a lot of computers, and there's an issue there too because you're disconnected from the social reality. And so there's a lot of social studies coming out. But if you went back to some of the mapping and you look at the actual functioning, the electrical functioning of the brains, you might be able to discern patterns. And that's the essence of the question.
partially try to there was a study in Arizona looking into people that they took away their technology, and then they mapped the map, saw some changes in some connectivity measures when they used compared to when they didn't use digital devices or not. I think there are changes, but the wonderful thing about our brains is adaptability, and adaptability doesn't change just doesn't stop when you're a child. It Adaptability of the network. So I think it's an ongoing thing. If you look at the infants, we actually we prune neurons. If you look at the infant and you look afterwards, the brain prunes neurons. So there's always changes and adaptability. So think about it as a network, as a big network filled with highways and roads and multiple transportation points, there is maintenance, there are changes. And so there is some brain plasticity, which actually is fortunate, and we can use the brain plasticity in neurodegenerative disorders and in other disorders. So I don't think there are irreversible changes. I'm not talking about evolutionary Permian period scale, but in the short term, we develop all the time, and our networks are very adaptable.
From my own observation, as a data point, I think the digital technologies in terms of augmenting learning and stuff, I think it actually hinders because you're no longer using the gross motor skills in terms of learning and the gross or the fine motor. Actually, you're using the fine motor skills, but then the clicking movements are very different than gross motor learning. So I think that's just an observation. But you guys are, as an engineer, as a data observation, but you guys are the scientists. So there's got to get ahead of it. I think there's a lot of issues from personal experience.
Yeah, no, thank you for that comment. I mean, I think it's super exciting, and it's a discussion in itself. So I unfortunately we won't go into that right now. I think we're more or less done with our time. First of all, I'd really like to thank the participants for for the questions and for taking the time and for staying with us during this exciting one. I'd like to thank, of course, Dan Treiman and the NEIBC for enabling the webinar. I'd like to thank our speakers, Dr. Don Yashiv, Ms. Gilit Segal, Professor Oren Shriki, Dr. Noam Peled, and of course, Mr. Avi Aron. Once again, thanks to the participants. Over to you, Dan, for closing.
Just remain to be said that it was fascinating hour or more than an hour. And thank you, everybody. And let's see you in our next webinar. Have a good day, everybody.